Hi guys and welcome to Studio Wildlife. In today's video I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm actually going to show you some ideas for painting backgrounds to try and improve your sketchbooks, because when I was younger, when I was doing my A-levels and when I was doing my GCSEs, the backgrounds were something that I didn't really put much thought into and much effort into, so I just thought I'd share with you some really simple and easy background ideas just to improve your sketchbook. The colours I'm using are raw umber, cadmium blue, yellow ochre, black, burnt umber, cadmium red, and titanium white. For a lot of these, or for at least starting out, I'm going to use this flat nylon brush. So the first one, I'm starting off using some raw umber, and I'm just going to do a little wash using some acrylic paints. So I like using a big brush because it allows me to do those big bold strokes, which are more interesting than using those small tiny detailed brushes. To this I'm adding a little bit of blue just to add some more colour. You can see I'm speeding up the process here. Just adds that little bit more interest than just painting the page a solid block colour or just leaving it white. By using the end of the brush and by dabbing it, you can change the marks that you're creating, which again just adds more interest to that background. I've done the same thing, just using a different set of colours, so you can tailor this technique to any colour palette that you want. So here you can see those two really simple, easy backgrounds, just using some acrylic paint and some washes, and just painting on top of these, doing your collages, doing your sketches, whatever, just improves that background, improves that piece, improves that page so much. Next, a really simple one and probably a favourite for being taught in school is just using some coffee and a watercolour brush. So all this is some watered down coffee, and we're just dabbing it all over the page just to give it that aged look. Later on I'll show you how you can add a little bit more to this than just leaving this coffee stains, and we might even draw a picture on over the top. But I think that picture is going to be reserved for my Patreons, so if you would like to see the drawing that I do over the top of this, please go and subscribe to my Patreon channel. I'll put a link down to that in the description. So just to add a little bit of a twist to these coffee backgrounds, I like to use a pastel pencil, and I just like to draw around the little bits of white that are still showing through, just to emphasise them, just to make them pop. You could also do a little bit of pencil shading here, but I just decided to keep it simple and just do some little bold outlines, which just again adds a little bit more interest to that background and makes it look a little bit more different than other people's or things that you've seen before. Back to the acrylics now, and I'm just using a plastic palette knife just to scrape some quite watered down raw umber paint over the page. So this works really well for the sketchbook that I'm using. I'm using a moleskin sketchbook, and the paper can hold that water really well. Certain papers tend to warp a little bit and don't really take to this technique very well, but if you're just doing your school sketchbook, this technique will be fine. But I wouldn't want to be creating really any artworks that I'm going to be selling on cheap sketchbook paper. I want to save that for canvases or wooden panels, but for sketchbooks, for art classes and things like that, this is perfect to use. So just a little bit of yellow ochre and then a little bit of burnt umber mixed with a little bit of black and some cadmium red, just to add a few more colour variations, again just to make it that little bit more interesting. To finish it off, I decided to add some white over the top, and again you could do this with any colour palette you want. There's no rules, you're just trying new techniques to create interesting marks. Another tool that I'm a really big fan of is these ink rollers, and they're great for inks, but they're also great for acrylics. So if you just roll it over a surface with some acrylic, I like to use watered down acrylic, which gives the appearance of these layers so we can overlap and add more details rather than just going in straight with thick, non-watered down paint. If we do it transparently, we can water it down with some other different forms of paint, and we can build up layers and different textures and different patterns. But this ink roller technique is a great technique to add interesting marks really quickly. And you could do collages over this, you could do drawings over this, your photo pages here, or title pages, or artist studies here, and it just makes it that bit more interesting than leaving it on a white background. Another pretty standard technique here is the salt and watercolour. So just normal table salt and some watercolours from a watercolour palette, and I'm just blocking in some different colours. For this one I'm going for a pinky bluey colour with a little bit of yellow. Again, it doesn't really matter too much the colours that I'm using, you can do anything you want, and then I just sprinkle some salt over the top. This didn't turn out as effectively as I liked, but the colours themselves were quite interesting, and this is something that I've not really tried in my own work other than being at school. But this salt and watercolour technique, basically the salt absorbs some of the watercolour and leaves tiny white marks in the paint, but I don't know whether it's the page that I'm using or the salt that I'm using or the watercolours that I'm using. It didn't work too well for me, but I liked the effect anyway. Some of the spaces where I put the salt did leave those white marks, others they were just slightly discoloured white, so it still kept some of that pink and some of that blue. But again, it's a great sort of really quick, really easy background technique to make your sketchbook pages much more interesting. I just used a brush then just to get rid of all of those salt particles. Another quick and really simple technique is just use a toothbrush and some watered down acrylic paint. So dip your brush in your paint, dip it in the water, and then dip it in the water one final time, and then just use your thumb or your finger or the end of another paintbrush just to splatter that paint around. And it just creates this really interesting background effect, this fuzzy background effect, and these splatters that really simple, they don't take much time, and they look really effective. So this is my favourite technique now. This is using the charcoal powder. So this is how, if some of you have seen my Instagram and my Facebook page and my other drawings, I like to use these charcoal backgrounds. So I just use a brush and some charcoal powder, and I just splatter and spread that charcoal powder around the page, trying to just create interesting marks and patterns. If I was doing this to do something like a wildlife drawing, I actually start by blocking in my initial sort of structures using this technique. Once I've got all this charcoal powder down, I use acetone. And you could use nail polish remover as long as it contains acetone. I used to use that, but now I've bought pure acetone and this spray bottle, and I just spray it on, and it just creates these really interesting dark splash marks that I find great for my artwork, but they'd also be perfect as background ideas for your sketchbook. Another really good technique might be a little bit out of some people's price range, but using gold leaf. So you could get pure gold leaf, which is what I've got, or imitation gold leaf also works. You can get fake gold leaf, you could get silver leaf, you could get all varying colours of leaf. And basically you just use this sort of gold leaf glue, which you can paint using a brush over your page, which is what I'm doing here. So it doesn't really matter which brush, but I'm just trying to apply this in some interesting marks and interesting patterns, not trying to completely cover the page, although you could completely cover the page if you wanted to, but I like to have this sort of fragmented appearance. So I'll just cover it with glue, and then I'll show you how we use the gold leaf and apply it to get nice patterns. So the gold leaf that I'm using comes in these little packs, these little sheets of gold leaf, but you can get crumpled bits of gold leaf, you can even get gold paint as well, or liquid gold. But basically with the sheets, once you've waited for your glue to dry for about 15 minutes, it wants to be tacky, you can place your gold leaf over the page, trying to put it over that glue, and then watch what happens when you peel away that gold leaf. So just using a little makeup brush just to pat it down, you peel away that gold leaf, and the areas where your glue was should hold that gold leaf. So here you can see, and then we just brush it away with that makeup brush, brush some of that gold leaf around to other parts of the page, and we get these nice fragmented bits of leaf. So I'll just speed this up so you can see the whole process. I'm just taking a few different sheets, just dabbing them around, trying to use all of that gold leaf, and then here you go. So you can see you've got that shiny metal leaf effect, which I think looks fantastic. So this is the part of the video where it gets a little bit different for my Patreon supporters. So thank you guys so much for supporting me on Patreon. What I'm going to do is show you a couple more interesting ways to spice up these drawings, improve these backgrounds a little bit, and just make them that little bit more interesting for doing your sketches on top of, doing whatever it is you're doing. But yeah, just thought I'd show you how I make them a little bit more interesting. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found these little tips to improve your sketchbook backgrounds really helpful. And if you would like to watch more videos like this and watch more of this video, please go and become a patron. It would mean so much to me, and your support is really spurring me on to create more videos like this and more helpful tips and tricks to help you improve your art. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.